welcome back to the shop. It's day unknown +2. Looks like we might get some more rain. This box of various Yoeleo stuff they sent me, some of which has to be installed. It's a little treasure chest of accessories. Speed play pedals, some Wahoo sensing units, bottle cages, frame mount pump, tool kit, whatever. Some bar tape. Chain needs to be degreased and waxed. So, where's it stand? It's starting to look like a bicycle. There's all kinds of little things when you're putting this together that are hold-ups. I went and bought this so I can use it to torque the lock ring for the cassette, but I bought the damn wrong thing. I need to step up from 1/4 inch to that. And I bought the same damn thing, so got to take that back. That's the kind of stuff I do. Anyway, the cassette's on and it's tightened a little bit. Needs to be torqued. Derailleur's mounted. Both brake calipers mounted. I've just got cable sticking in the port running to the caliper just for visual. The cables need threaded. I got the rotor axle spindle installed in the bottom bracket, and that wasn't so easy. Curious thing about Hambini's bottom bracket is when he machines this, he makes them 1 by 1. When he machines them, he's making that to Shimano tolerances. So the axle, Shimano axle, is a 24 mil. The rotor axle, you can get a 24 or 30. And I got the 24 because I wanted to use his bottom bracket. Now his bottom bracket comes with, if I pull this out, which I'm going to have to do, you can see in here there's a little black Delrin. Delrin is also called POM or acetyl. It's a very useful type of plastic material, very hard, very durable, and it's self-lubricating. That's one of its material properties. So that's a good thing that he's using. But those caps pop off, and underneath the cap would be the bearing. Those caps have an inside diameter of 24 mil, obviously, to slip onto this axle. The interesting thing is, there's a rotor axle, not a Shimano axle. So what did Rotor do? Rotor machined their axle to a point that I think Hambini told me is 0.003 millimeters different from Shimano, and that was so they could avoid any patent infringements by using the 24 mil axle, which is a Shimano thing. So I had a problem. I couldn't fit both Delrin caps over the axle. This one slid on the axle, no problem. The one on the non-drive side over there would not go on the axle. And I tried a little bit more pressure to fit it on, but no. When I took the axle away from that cap that I was trying to press on, I could see a little line, very tiny line, about 2 millimeters into the cap. This cap is like a sleeve that extends about 1 centimeter in, and that sleeve fits inside the bearing. Well, that opening on that Delrin cap machined to Shimano tolerance, and rotor's axle is machined to rotor's tolerance, and that 0.003 difference made all the difference. I couldn't get that cap on there, so I called the doctor. I didn't call him, I emailed him. He's very good about getting back with you for technical support, and very, very good, I should say. And he explained why that Delrin cap might not be going on the rotor axle. I said, so what's the fix? And he said, you're going to have to hone it. Hone it, he means grind out some of the material on the inside of that non-drive side Delrin cap. Well, I have a hone that I use to hone this bottom bracket because the bottom bracket shell was a little bit undersized, so that Hambini's bottom bracket wouldn't go in it. That was a problem with the frame, not Hambini's bottom bracket, by the way. But my particular hone, too big to fit inside that Delrin cap and hone it. So I had to use my finger on one stone. It's a triple stone, spring loaded. If you've never seen a cylinder bore hone, that's what it is. It's spring loaded, 3 small stones about that long on the end of 3 different arms, and you put it in the hole, it springs open so it self-centers. And then you use a drill to hone it. Well, I wasn't going to use a drill, but in any case, I couldn't get all 3 stones in the 24 mil opening. So I used my finger in one stone, and it took me about a half an hour of honing, turning that cap, turn the cap, Took me about half an hour to get it to the point where that cap would slide onto the axle. So I put the axle in and I checked it out, and of course it was really tight. It wouldn't spin. You had to turn it to get it to spin. So I took the thing back out and I honed it some more. And I kept doing that until that Delrin cap spun on the axle the same as this Delrin cap. So they're both tight fitting, but it doesn't bind the axle. So you run into stuff like that. You run into stuff like, oh, Yoeleo apparently didn't pack a frame grommet for that. That's no big deal. You just buy a grommet and put it in. This plate that covers the alternate junction A location, I had 3 different types of plates for how we were going to use this. Since I'm not using it, I wanted to use the blank plate. Well, the other 2 fit in there no problem. You just drop it in and tighten it down. This one didn't fit in, so I spent about half an hour with a metal file filing the edges to get it in, and it's in, but I think I'm going to pull it back out and do it some more because doesn't make me happy. I need to do it more. You run into that. Run into the fact that the lower headset bearing Yoeleo packed is an 8 millimeter stack height, and when you use that bearing, this gap is about another millimeter wider. It didn't look nice, so I went out yesterday and bought myself the same bearing, but with a 7 millimeter stack height. So now the fork gap here is closed up and it looks normal. That kind of stuff abounds when you're doing a project. You just have to figure out a solution. Now this one, I'm going to post a little short video of when I first put the fork in the frame before I started anything else. And that was the first thing I noticed. I said, well, that gap is not elegant. I got to do something about that. And then I was looking at some other guys' Yoeleo bike builds on the internet, on YouTube. And this fellow has a channel called Cycling Milan. He's a young guy in Belgium. And it was a 9-part series on his Yoeleo R12 build, and I recommend you look at it if you're going to do a Yoeleo build. And he talked about the exact same thing, and that was his solution. Now, I hadn't imagined the solution when I first put this fork in. I just saw the problem, and then I saw his video post, and I went, well, there's the solution. I just need to get a smaller stack height to that bearing. So I went to my local bike shop and I got that and fixed that. Obviously the steering tube hadn't been cut yet because, well, I got it in a semblance of how it's going to be when I get on to ride it. I can start doing measurements of this bike, compare it to my existing bike, make sure the seat height is the right level, and the distance from bars to the ground basically is the easiest way to figure out if it works. Is if you have a bike and the distance from the top of the bars to the ground vertically is different, then you make an adjustment. Like if your existing bike suits your fancy and this one is either too high or too low compared, you just make an adjustment with spacers or taking spacers out. Or you get a different bar with a rise to the stem. This one has no real rise. In fact, it's listed as a negative. So today, I'm going to install the rotor cranks. This is the non-drive side crank. It's got a little preload on it. This is a drive side. It just slides over the splines on the axle, tightens down. That one slides over the splines on the other side, but it has a little preload you have to set. It's a one-piece chain ring, CNC machined. It's one piece. And Rotor sends along a little user guide on how to do this. And I've never fit a rotor axle, and it tells you what spacers you need based on what bottom bracket you're using. So I just look down here and I've got a BB86 right there. I come across here and it tells you what type of spacers you need. And these are the spacers and the O-ring. Turns out both sides need 2 spacers, 1 O-ring. And then it just has a little diagram showing the spacers and O-ring. Now, I presumed that the big fat piece here, which is way oversized compared to the actual, must be the spacer, and the other thing the O-ring, but that's something you don't really want to mess up. So I sent Rotor a message last night and asked him, okay, when I'm installing the axle, what's the order of installing the spacers and O-ring? And their customer support is really good, and they got right back with me. And Joel told me, he says, well, the O-ring is a weather protect seal, so that's going to go against the bearing, or in this case, against the Delrin cap on Hambini's bottom bracket. The spacers will go in toward the chain set. And then on the other side, the same thing. O-ring goes to the bearings, spacers toward the crank. Anyway, it basically tells you everything you need to know, but when you're putting it together, you just want to put it together right the first time. So I sent Rotor that message and they got back. Another thing about the Yoeleo bike, they sent an out front mount for the computer, and it has no rise like this one has. It's just a cheap little piece of carbon It's just a straight, flat profile from one end to the other. And it doesn't look great, first of all. And it had no rise, and I wanted to have a little more room underneath that thing. I'm going to mount a Moon. That's a brand name. It's really good. Front light. So I got this from AliExpress, and it's not expensive, and it is nice. But of course there's all kinds of little things, like here's the GoPro mount. That mounts on with 2 hex head screws, and you mount it to this piece first, and then you mount this piece, and you get 4 different options: Wahoo, Garmin, Brighton, and one for a Chinese made computer. Then you mount this piece, and it has 2 other hex head screws. So you got 4 screws in that thing, which is kind of goofy to begin with. You know, why you need 4 screws to put together something like this. But it is what it is. But I went to mount the GoPro mount, and of course the holes on the GoPro didn't line up exactly with the holes in this piece. So I fussed around with it for a while, and I finally just said screw it. I got my drill out, and I just drilled the one hole here a little bit bigger, and then it went on with no problem. There's all kinds of goofy little shit like that that you have to deal with. It's no big deal, but it does take time. And so these are extra stem spacers. I don't know if I'm going to use it, and those will go on the rotor when I install that, which I'm going to do next. Anyway, that's what else for today. I'm going to thread brake cables today. I'm going to go back to that shop and buy the right ratchet extension so I can lock down that cassette properly. I'm going to make some measurements on this frame and compare it to my existing frame so I can get an idea where I want to chop this off. I think this is going to be about right. I want to leave 5mm poking out the top in case it is not right and I need more space underneath there. And that'll happen today. All the little fine adjustments and everything, they still need to be made, obviously, but it's coming along. It's starting to look like a bike. Day unknown +2 in the shop. There you have it.